Hello and welcome to the video. This is an overview and flight review of this thing here. This is the ProTek 35 from iFlight. Now, I've had a couple of things in here from iFlight over the last year or two, and I noticed that Drone Authority has started to stock all of the iFlight bind and fly, ready to fly stuff. So I thought, great opportunity. Let's get my hands on some of this and we'll actually give them a try out. Now, this is one that's only designed around the O3 Air unit. This one has an O3 Air unit inside, available with either an Express LRS receiver, which is the one I've got here, hence the little antenna at the back, or you can get it to bind to the DJI radio that goes along with the goggles. So let me unbox it, go through the specs, and go through the usual stuff. So the highlights here are that it is really built around the DJI O3 Air unit. There is room on the front if you want to add an action camera as well, and the battery plug at the back is all designed so it's nice and retained. You just plug the XT60 into the back. Has a true all-in-one board, Blitz F7 base, 55 amp ESCs, and it's made from carbon fiber top and bottom plates with an injection molded surround. Frame is 151mm wheelbase. The motor are Xing 2205 2300 kV motors, and the props are Nazgul 3535 propellers. Now, you do get the foam to go around the outside. I haven't connected it on mine, but that does mean that it is a little bit more bump resistant than if you don't fit that stuff. Weight without a battery is about 363 grams. Dimensions are 217 by 194 by 32.5 millimeters. Maximum speed is going to be roughly 140 kilometers an hour. This is going to need a 6S battery, about a 1400 milliamps. Hover time is only going to be about 6 minutes, so you're only going to get 4 or 5 minutes if you're flying in a more spirited fashion. Single antenna at the back for the O3 Air unit, and everything looks really solid. There are a couple of cute touches on here. Things like, for example, the USB connectors are on the back, so you can plug into the bottom one to flash and set up your flight controller, or the top one to access the O3 Air unit. So while we're talking about USB connections, let's have a quick look at the Betaflight setup. So again, I'm plugging into the bottom of the 2 USB ports at the back using the latest configurator. The version on here is 4.32, so not the very latest and greatest, but still absolutely fine. Bit of data in the data flash, which is good. That means it's been armed from the factory before it was sent out. Always happy to see that. I'll talk about the O3 Air unit in a minute. Everything seems to be working fine. Turn on expert mode. Ports are configured like this. Not a lot, really. Lots of ports, but none of them are really being used for anything. UART3 for the serial receiver for CRSF, and UART1 has MSP turned on because that's the one I think that's been used for the O3 Air unit. Configuration looks like this: 3.2 kilohertz gyro and PID loops. CPU is just ticking over at 21%. OSD turned on, LED strips turned on. Failsafe is set to drop, which is fine. There's no GPS on this, so no return to home. If we have a problem, then we have to go and find the thing. Receiver is set up for a serial receiver for CRSF. This is Express LRS in here, and that was relatively easy to bind. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Modes are set up incredibly simply. Auxiliary 1 or channel 5 for arming, and then channel 2, whatever you do with it, is going to be set to angle. Most professional or accomplished pilots are going to want to go in there and have a play. Similarly with the OSD, the layout is very basic, so you probably want to come in here and have a little bit of a goof around so that the O3 Air unit displays the things that you're actually interested in. I'm going to put a dump and diff below for this so that you can have a look at how the setup is done. A couple of little tips in terms of the setup. The stuff that's set up for the O3 Air unit is absolutely already done. So set OSD underscore DisplayPort underscore device equals MSP is configured, and also set DisplayPort underscore MSP underscore serial equals, I think it's 0 on this. That's because UART1 is set, so you set the number for one less than the UART that the O3 Air unit is connected to. I always find that really counterintuitive. There must be a better way to do it. I know there is. iNav has a better way, but that's how you set it up on here. Binding to the radio, the Express LRS receiver that came with this one didn't have a passphrase, so I had to power it 3 times. Sadly, the receiver is only powered from the battery, so you're going to have to plug the battery in order to power it. So if you want to power cycle it 3 times, you're going to have to plug the battery in 3 times very quickly. That's not a great thing to do on any quad. I actually popped the top off mine to get into the actual body and then unplug and replug the connector 3 times very quickly to get it into bind mode. The O3A unit isn't activated here as well, disappointingly, so you will have to not only power the O3A unit, but connect it to your computer and go through the activation routine. I wish it had been activated from the factory. I guess that's something that DJI are asking people to do at the moment. But again, for me, I end up removing the top deck to be able to access the bind button to make that all work. So, what's it like to fly? This is one of those models that's very easy to fly in a very smooth and controlled way. There's lots of expo set up on the controls, and it's only really set up for angle mode out the box, and that gives a very, very relaxed flying experience, perfect for capturing aerial video. Now it's hovering just over a quarter throttle, so that's about minus 35 on my HTX channel. I have tweaked the curve a little bit on this on the radio just to make it slightly easier to throttle around that, so I can hover about and fly it very smoothly. And it is very smooth. It's easy to get that smooth cinematic footage of whatever it is you're flying over. Angle mode, as it is set up, is probably not going to allow you to access the real power, speed and ability of this frame, so if you want to explore that kind of stuff, then maybe have a play with things like horizon or rate mode. But for angle, particularly for those who are relatively inexperienced, which is what I'm flying in here in this video, it just provides beautiful, stable footage, and it's very, very easy to make it look good. Talking about the camera performance is lovely, as expected. This is a DJI O3A unit. There's no jello, there's no props in the image because the camera's right at the front. No issues at all, and there is also that USB port at the back to access any recording stored on the O3A unit as well. 4 minutes flying, which is typically what I'm pushing this to, leaves about 53% in the pack. So if you're flying like this, then I would recommend probably 5-6 minutes maximum is what you're going to get out of it. The LEDs at the rear do start off nice and green. They're a great aid for line of sight flying orientation, but as the battery discharges, it'll go through green, through the amber and oranges, and eventually into red. However, I wouldn't push it as far as red. I would just set a timer on the radio for about 5 minutes and you should be safe. Noise is at the expected levels. This isn't a quiet thing. When it's closer in, you can absolutely hear it. It sounds like a very large bag of very angry wasps. However, once you're over about 100 yards away, it's getting harder to hear, particularly if there's any wind about as well. So overall, this is a very nice, easy to fly quad that's very easy to get that very smooth cinematic style of footage, and there's also room on the top for an action camera if you want to do that too. So there are a number of things that I like about this. This is a very solid, well-made, nicely flying quad, and thanks to the O3A unit, you get some beautiful views out the front. Plenty of power, it should be, because this is 6S, so you can fly it with or without an action camera. However, if you've got an O3A unit in the front and you're flying it smoothly, then to be honest, you're probably going to be able to use the footage from that without an action camera on it as well. And if you leave the action camera off, you'll get slightly longer flight time. And I like the fact that they've exposed the USB ports at the back on this little connector here, which has all of the pieces. So above these two little LEDs at the back, you have the two USB ports with the plugs in. Bottom one again is for the flight controller, top one is for the DJI system. That means that you don't have to take the top off in order to plug everything in. However, that brings me on to a couple of considerations. You do need to activate the air unit in here for the O3 DJI system in order for it to bind to the goggles and for you to use it. That means you downloading a piece of technology from DJI, the DJI Assistant 2 for the drones, plugging it in, having it powered from the battery on the bench, and then going through the activation routine. Another thing that was disappointing to me is that there isn't any power to the receiver from the USB cable. You do have to have it powered from the battery again. It's unusual in these modern times to have a flight controller that doesn't automatically pass the 5 volts through to a receiver. Maybe it's been designed around the O3A unit, where the O3A unit is also providing the S-bus connection for the controls. but I absolutely think it's a mistake not to have the receiver powered by the USB cable. It means that that part of the setup needs an extra step or two, and plugging a battery in without taking the props off can be dangerous. Basic setup for modes and OSD in the Betaflight setup. Betaflight setup is fine, but any accomplished pilot is going to want to go in there and have a little bit of a play, although it's fine for just the first flight and test. And you might end up doing what I did, taking the top off to get to that DJI bind button. There should have been easier access to that. This has been designed around the O3A unit. There should have been a nice port or way to get to it so you can just press it quickly to bind to your goggles. Not very clean. And finally, with all these kind of quads, do check you can get spares availability. This frame, if it does snap, is such an integral part to how this thing is put together that if you broke it, then the quad is going to be US. So I would check that those kind of spare parts are something you can get your hands on. So if you do have a nasty crash and snap things, then you haven't just thrown £400 or £500 worth of quad in the bin. So who's this aimed at? Well, I think it's aimed at those who want a compact and speedy and stable filming quad that can also have a turn of speed and capture some more exciting footage and get close into things thanks for those props. I do occasionally hear from pilots coming to this kind of stuff from the DJI technology. This is not a DJI quad. It will not hover in place. It will not do things like return to home. It requires a little bit more skill and practice to fly. But with that little bit of skill and practice, it'll give you an awful lot of fun. Not one I probably recommend for first timers who are trying to get all this stuff to work with the limited access to the internals and also lack of a detailed manual for how to activate the O3A unit, how to bind to the goggles, how to get the radio receiver into bind mode and all those other things. But if you know how to do that, you'll be able to get this flying pretty quickly. Thank you for watching my video. Check out the playlist, and adding Pedantry 60 to your search terms will help you find my content. If you haven't done so already, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps a lot. You can support the time I spend here answering questions and helping others by using the links in the video description.